Some other memories of the funeral have stuck in my mind. The old boy's face, for instance, when he caught up with us for the last time, just outside the village. His eyes were streaming with tears of exhaustion and distress, or both together. But because of the wrinkles, they couldn't flow down. They spread out, crisscrossed, and formed a small gloss on the old warm face. And I can remember the look of the church, the villagers in the street, the red geraniums on the graves, Paris fainting fit, he crumpled up like a rag doll, the tawny red earth pattering on mother's coffin, the bits of white roots mixed up with it, then more people, voices, the wait outside a cafe for the bus, the rumble of the engine, and my little thrill of pleasure when we entered the first brightly lit streets of Algiers, and I pictured myself going straight to the bed and sleeping 12 hours at a stretch. On waking, I understood why my employer had looked rather cross when I asked for my 2 days off. It is Saturday today. I hadn't thought of this at the time. It only struck me when I was getting out of the bed. Obviously, he had seen that it would mean my getting 4 days holiday straight off, and one couldn't expect him to like that. Still, for one thing, it wasn't my fault if mother was buried yesterday and not today. And then again, I would have had my Saturday and Sunday off in any case. But naturally, this didn't prevent me from seeing my employer's point. Getting up was an effort, as I've been really exhausted by the previous day's experiences. While shaving, I wondered how to spend the morning, and decided that a swim would do me good. So I caught the streetcar that goes down to the harbor. It was quite like old times. A lot of young people were in the swimming pool, amongst them Mary Cardona, who used to be a typist at the office. I was rather keen on her in those days, and I fancy she liked me too. But she was with us so short a time that nothing came out of it. While I was helping her to climb onto a raft, I let my hand stray over her breasts. Then she lay flat on the raft while I trod water. After a moment, she turned and looked at me. Her hair was over her eyes and she was laughing, and I clambered up onto the raft beside her. The air was pleasantly warm, and half-jokingly, I let my head sink back upon her lap. She didn't seem to mind, so I let it stay there. I had the sky full in my eyes, all blue and gold, and I could feel Mary's stomach rising and falling gently under my head. We must have stayed a good half hour on the raft, both of us half asleep. When the sun got too hot, she died off, and I followed. I caught up with her, put my arm round her waist, and we swam side by side. She was still laughing. While we were drying ourselves on the edge of the swimming pool, she said, "I am browner than you." I asked her if she would come to the movies with me that evening. She laughed again and said yes, if I would take her to the comedy everybody was talking about, the one with Fernandel in it. When we had dressed, she stared at my black tie and asked if I was in mourning. I explained that my mother had died. "When?" she asked, and I said, "Yesterday." She made no remark, though I thought she shrank away a little. I was just going to explain to her that it wasn't my fault, but I checked myself, as I remembered having said the same thing to my employer, and realizing then it sounded rather foolish. Still, foolish or not, somehow one can't help feeling a bit guilty, I suppose. Anyhow, by evening, Mary had forgotten all about it. The film was funny in parts, but some of it was downright stupid. She pressed her leg against mine while we were in the picture house, and I was fondling her breast. Toward the end of the show, I kissed her, but rather clumsily. Afterward, she came back with me to my place. When I woke up, Mary had gone. She told me her aunt expected her first thing in the morning. I remember it was a Sunday, and Dad put my hat and lazily sniffed the smell of brine that Mary's hat had left on the plow. I slept until 10. After that, I stayed in the bed until noon, smoking cigarettes. I decided not to lunch at Celeste's restaurant, as I usually did. They would be sure to pester me with questions, and I dislike being questioned, so I fried some eggs and ate them off the pan. I ate without bread, as there wasn't any left, and I couldn't be bothered going down to buy it. After lunch, I felt at loose ends and roamed about the little flat. It suited us well enough when Mother was with me, but now that I was by myself, it was too large and I would move the dining table into my bedroom. That was now the only room I used it. It had all the furniture I needed: a brass bedstead, a dressing table, some cane chairs whose seats had more or less caved in, a wardrobe with a tarnished mirror. The rest of the flat was never used, so I didn't trouble to look after it. A bit later, for want of anything better to do, I picked up an old newspaper that was lying on the floor and read it. There was an advertisement of crucian salts, and I cut it out and pasted it into an album where I keep things that amuse me in the papers. Then I washed my hands and, as a last resource, went out on the balcony. My bedroom overlooks the main street of our street. Though it was a fine afternoon, the paving blocks were black and glistening, with what few people were about seemed in an absurd hurry. First of all, there were a family going for their Sunday afternoon walk, two small boys in sailor suits, with short trousers hardly down to their knees, and looking rather uneasy in their Sunday best. Then a little girl with a big pink bow and black patent leather shoes. Behind them was their mother, an enormously fat woman in a brown silk lace, and their father, a dapper little man, whom I knew by sight. He had a straw hat, a walking stick, and a butterfly tie. Seeing him beside his wife, I understood why people said he came of a good family and had married beneath him. Next came a group of young fellows, the local bloods, with sleek oiled hair, red ties, coats cut very tight at the waist, braided pockets, and square-toed shoes. I guess they were going to one of the big theaters in the center of the town. That was why they had started out so early and were hurrying to the streetcar stop, laughing and talking at the top of their voice. After they had passed, the street gradually emptied. By this time, all the matinees must have begun. Only a few shopkeepers and cats remained about. Above the sycamores bordering the road, the sky was cloudless, but the light was soft.